Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is The Take for Market Rebellion. And what an interesting week we had last week as we finished out the month of May, which was a monster month. And a lot of people talk about sell in May and go away and all this BS that everybody likes to throw out there. I can tell you this. You need to be in the markets and you need to have at least your attention focused on the markets consistently. And that means that you got to look when it's May, when it's April, when it's whatever month it might be. All of these crazy things that people talk about all the time. That is not the way you want to trade. You want to be very disciplined and you want to be on top of it. So, how did we finish up last week? Well, when you look at the volumes last week, absolutely extraordinary. Now, let's talk about this. It was a 4-day week last week. We had 29 million, 31.5 million, 29.5 million, 29.5 million. Those are the number of contracts that were being traded in the derivatives markets. That's where the volume is. That's where the growth is. That's where, when you're looking at the markets right now, that's where leverage is, because that was removed, leverage that is, was removed when we went through that financial crisis. So we've seen that explosive move in the options world, and that's why we love to be here. This is where we are, and this is where we focus on. And there are so many different ways that you can play things when you're looking at the derivatives markets, and that's why we talk about education all the time. Now, back to last week. So Thursday, we had that sharp sell-off late in the day, and it felt like that theme was starting to play out all over again. Then Friday morning, we come in, the markets are down, there's some pressure on the markets, but late in the day, rather than a sell-off, we started to accelerate and started to see a nice move to the upside. As a matter of fact, when you look at where we were in the final couple hours, we went from 25,153 on the Dow to 25,421. That was amazing. Just a really fast, rapid move to the upside and a really interesting move. Once again, now we talk about volatility all the time. Volatility, in my opinion, is exactly where it should be right now, which is to say somewhere between 28 and 30. And that's where it's been. And as a matter of fact, we went out 27.50. So that gives you a little idea. And that range that we were looking at on Friday, 27 to 30. So there has been this range that's definitely been stuck within this range. And we'll see, are we ready to make a move towards the downside, or are we looking for something maybe to the upside? After the run that we've had, after the monstrous move that we made in May, would I be shocked to see any kind of moves to the downside? I would not be. Now, on the other hand, there could be some nice, strong movements to the upside as people get a little bit more comfortable, as the economy starts to open up a little bit more. And so that's something we're going to be definitely keeping an eye on to see how fast, how rapid, what is the pace of opening up the economy once again. And obviously, there are so many different other factors that play in to where the markets are right now and where they might be. We talk about China tensions all the time. We talk about the pandemic. We've got all kinds of rioting going on. There are so many different factors that can be priced into this market right now that we have to compact all of those together and then take as good a look as we possibly can to get some sort of vision. And I think that's where the derivatives markets really does point the way for us in terms of where are we starting to shift and what we talked about rotation. So what sector is next? We have seen nothing but rotation after rotation, and it's been rapid. It's been incredible. The movement from one to the next. Matter of fact, take a look today. You'll see Zoom just zooming to the upside once again. And yet we're starting to see a nice recovery in the Dow, because the Dow this morning started off with some pressure on it and started to move even a little bit faster to the downside. We were down about 100 plus points, call it 130, 140 points, something like that. And yet the NASDAQ was flat and the S&P was flat. So we had this pull going on in terms of the Dow itself, and just a couple of names, and really one major name, Pfizer, was down about 7.5%. That definitely pulling on the markets to the downside. And we did have some positives. We did have a flip. Yeah, last week on Friday, when we were pushing to the downside, what was really pulling things early on, it was names like Raytheon and Boeing and some of those kind of names. What's moving us to the upside today? Raytheon and Boeing and Disney and those kind of names. Financials stuck out very much so early, because in the first half hour or so, we were down pretty significantly. Now we're actually in positive territory. We've completely flipped, and now here we are with the Dow up 50 points. We also got the NASDAQ, which was flat, up about 30 points, and the S&P up about 5 points. That was flat as well. So the S&P and the NASDAQ, a little bit of a move, but the Dow making the biggest move as it's turned from being down well over 100 points to now being up 53 points. So a lot of different names participating today on the positive side. We can see, and I mentioned some of those industrial names, but financials as well. And it's that same group of names led by Goldman and JP Morgan, American Express, those kind of names moving to the upside. You can throw in Citi, you can throw in Bank of America. This isn't a major move by the financials, but certainly in the positive and really strong throughout this session. So fighting against some of that pull to the downside. The other side of it is it seems like a lot of that trade of comfort is coming back. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, a lot of the leaders right now, airlines, American, United, Delta, across the board. And when you look at the hotel area, you look at Hilton, you look at Marriott, very strong today as well. Cruise ships, you've got Carnival and Norwegian. A lot of these names have been really starting to shift and find some buyers that are starting to move some of these names to the upside. Today is one of those days. Every day is a little bit different. Rotation, as I say, happens very fast. Now, oil. Oil's been hanging around in it kind of quietly because I don't hear a lot of chatter about it. I just saw a little piece on CNBC, but very little conversation about this. But the price of oil just continues to kind of hang around now at that 34, 35 level. This morning, we're down about 3%. It's already starting to rally off of that and start to pull back up a little bit. Not dramatically, but definitely pulling back up. So that's something. Volatility, by the way, with that move to the downside that we had, we started to push up towards 30 once again. We've eased off of that a little bit, but it's early in the day. We're not even an hour into the session right now, and we've already had this big reversal out of the Dow itself, and that really is something. We look across all three majors to flip that fast back into the green. I think that's pretty amazing. As a matter of fact, really impressive. So, have we had a lot of unusual option activity? We certainly have. I've already looked, and in the first hour, we've already had 6 various hits in unusual option activity, probably even seeing more right now as I speak because of this move that we're seeing in the markets, people wanting to get in. So there's all kinds of, we're seeing some in the financial industry, we're seeing some in the gaming industry, there's all kinds of different areas that we're seeing. So it's not isolated to just one right now, but the one that stuck out for me, and I find it really interesting because this is a name that got me excited when I first saw the unusual option activity in this probably well over a month or so ago, maybe 2 months ago. And it's a company called Welltower. So WELL, senior living and hospital care. Really interesting. It's a REIT, gives you a great dividend yield. So that part of it's pretty solid. But I never start with dividend yield. I look at the fundamentals. I like what the fundamentals look like for this company. And obviously, if they're giving you a yield, that's cherry on top. So what am I seeing today? Well, you'll see a lot of selling of the September 45 calls. Those are people that are selling because they've had great profits and now they're flipping out of that. And I believe that was what initially got me into this stock was then when they initially were buying these September 45 calls. Those calls today are getting towards $10, taking them off, and they're rolling them. And that's something we always like to see is you're in a trade, you love what you did, it was profitable, and you want to stay in that trade, but you're being very, very smart. So there's a lot of different reasons why this looks like a smart trader who's had a great success in the initial trade, but still wants to be there. They're buying 5,000 of the September 55 calls, double nickels, the 55 calls, trading for about $4.50. Again, when I first saw this, I was intrigued enough when I saw this buying of the September 45s before, and now today they're rolling out of those and up into the September 55s, I decided I wanted to buy the stock. Now, people ask me all the time, why do you buy stock instead of options? You're an options guy. Yes, I am. But there are times where I think it makes a lot of sense. So at the time of my buying the stock in WELL, I was buying it for multiple reasons. One, I like the dividend yield. Two, I thought the fact that we had implied volatilities were through the roof relatively to the normal levels. I'm going to get a lot more bang for my buck with those. So I did that. So buying stock, selling calls, rolling up calls as people are coming back, that keeps me in the trade and I can collect a yield along the way. So in this particular instance, I found it made more sense to me, and there were expensive options, to be able to use the expensive options against a position in the stock itself. So gives you a little education of why I made that decision this time. We talk about education all the time. You really do need to know about the options world because it is the place where you are seeing growth. It is the place where last week we saw incredible numbers approaching about 30 million per day all week last week on average. So That's why we're here. That's why we're here with Market Rebellion, to try to educate you and give you the best opportunity. Doesn't mean you're promised success. Best opportunities for success. That's why we do what we do. We're hoping to help as many people out as humanly possible. That's what the education is going to do for you. That's why we make sure that people don't just jump into something, have a bad experience, and then they're angry. We do our very best to make sure that people are fully knowledgeable and understand all the mechanisms that go into the options world. It's where we love to be. I'm excited about today already. I see a lot of different stuff, and I can hear my computer going off right now. So even more unusual is hitting right now. I'm going to run over there in a second. Folks, have a great day of trading.